Hi, this is Steve Smith.
And this is Julie Lerman. Welcome back to our Domain-Driven Design Fundamentals course. This module will focus on modeling problems in software, and you're welcome to reach out to us online. You can find me online at thedatafarm.com or on Twitter at Julie Lerman.
And I'm at rdallas.com or on Twitter as @rdallas. In this module, we're going to take a look at how we decompose the model for the veterinary office domain. We'll talk about the importance of domain experts in DDD.
We'll drive this point home with a play in which we'll consider a few different scenarios for how the project might have gone, which should provide you with examples of ways to involve the domain expert in the design of the system.
Next, we'll talk about the domain model and some of the elements that typically are found in this part of the application. It's important to separate the core domain model from related subdomains, and we'll talk about how bounded contexts can help us accomplish this separation.
And then we'll wrap things up by talking about ubiquitous language and how this seemingly small thing with a big name can have a large impact on your model, your design, and of course your application. So let's get started. Steve and I both have a love for animals. In fact, Steve's wife, Michelle, is a veterinarian. In thinking about a sample application we could use for this course, we wanted to use something complex enough to justify the use of DDD. The veterinary clinic management domain made a lot of sense, allowing us to leverage our own experience as pet owners, as well as having a domain expert available in the form of Michelle, or Dr. Smith, as we'll be referring to her in the course.
There are many different pieces involved in managing a typical veterinary clinic. The staff needs to be able to schedule appointments. They likely need to schedule their own working shifts as well. They need to be able to invoice for their services and collect payments, and in many cases send out bills. They'll also need to be able to store and retrieve medical records, as well as work with external labs and specialty clinics. Most veterinary practices also have products for sale and may need to track inventory as well as sales. And there are often follow-ups and reminders that may need to be sent by mail, phone, or perhaps email. There is certainly sufficient complexity in this domain to merit the use of domain-driven design.
Of course, it's a good idea to speak with a domain expert about the system's requirements before diving in and beginning to code a solution. Whether you're tasked with building a full system or just adding a new feature, an overall understanding of the client's business is a critical start. Of course, it's just the beginning. It's also important that you have a continuous conversation with the domain expert throughout the development of the system. The simple system we showed in the last module needs some updates, so we're going to share some conversations we had with the domain expert to help validate our initial assumptions.
An important part of this conversation is going to be identifying the things that aren't included in the scope of the project or feature. To that end, we'll try to identify subdomains within the overall problem domain, and then determine whether or not we need to concern ourselves with these subdomains at the moment. If not, we can consciously remove them from the scope with the customer's approval and avoid confusion and possible missed expectations later. To get started though, we do want to know a little bit about the big picture. As Julie already mentioned, my wife Michelle is a veterinarian. In addition, she has a deep understanding of software development processes, having successfully managed software teams at NimblePros and Telerik. She's graciously agreed to play the role of domain expert for our course. In real life, she knows quite a bit about software and technology, but for the purposes of this course, she's playing the more traditional role of a veterinarian with little background in software development. Hi, Dr. Smith. Thanks for your time today. Julie and I would like to learn more about what goes on in your veterinary clinic. Can you share some of the big picture processes involved in the day-to-day operation of a clinic?
So the biggest thing is probably scheduling patients and keeping track of them once they arrive. Clients will usually call ahead, unless it's an emergency, and then we need to get them entered into our system. Of course, surgical procedures need to be scheduled in advance. And when they're here, we need to record information about the patient, our observations, notes, and diagnoses.
Wow, that's quite a list. Probably not what you were dreaming about when you started vet school. So many of these are all secondary to the core reason for being a vet, keeping pets healthy. And I think it sets you apart from other businesses that have to manage clients and schedule appointments. But you can't run a business without it. Is that all?
So when the appointment is over, they also have to pay. So most of the time that's done immediately, but we do have some billing that's done after the fact. And when they're checking out, they may need to buy some things for their pets, toys or prescriptions or maybe some prescription food as well. And we need to track all of that as well. For some of the lab work, we need to send that out and get the results back. And some prescriptions go out to outside pharmacies as well. So we need to manage all of those through the system.
Okay, so payments, billing, point of sale, labs, prescriptions. Anything else?
I think that's about it. Oh, we also use the system to note which staff members are working when. And right now, our website isn't integrated into the system at all. But we were thinking it'd be great if clients could view information about their pets, maybe schedule appointments, look up prescriptions, and we can make updates to the site without having to go through our computer contractor.
Okay, great. So we'll add staff scheduling and content management to the list. I don't want to assume you know what a content management system is. We also call it a CMS. You might have heard of that. It's a type of software system that lets the owner, that's you, be in charge of the information that's displayed. A blog is a really good example of a CMS that can be managed by its owner.
I have a blog, so I understand exactly what you mean. Something like that would be really great for us to have so we can make updates right in the house. But it's kind of like a blog, especially something that's more professional than my personal blog.
Cool, so I think that's probably enough of a big picture view for us to consider at the moment. Now let's try and think about which of these are connected to the others, so we can determine which ones we need to worry about for our application's needs.
We started with this fairly complicated view of the overall problem domain, but now we've segregated these into different areas, and we know which ones we need to focus on right now and which ones we can treat as external collaborators.
Determining where we can safely draw the line between what problem our immediate application needs to solve and what is outside of its area is certainly helpful. It's also important that this be well understood and communicated among everyone involved in the project.
Now that we have a better understanding of the domain and the other subdomains around the scheduling system, it's time to focus more on understanding the scheduling subdomain. We had another meeting with Dr. Smith, and you can listen in.
Hi guys, welcome back to the clinic. How are things going with the computer system?
We're making good progress, and now we're ready to look at another more complex feature.
We know there's a lot that goes on here, but today we want to focus on appointment scheduling because we realize we're still a little confused about it.
Since we've both owned pets for a long time, we figure we probably have a rough idea of what's needed, but it'll be good to talk through it with you. Do your patients usually schedule their appointments over the phone?
Okay, so our patients aren't usually involved in the scheduling. Usually it's the clients that call in for appointments for their pets. And yeah, usually it's on the phone or in person when they're checking out after an office visit. Julie and I talked about that earlier.
Yeah, so Steve, the patients are the animals and the clients are the people or the pet owners.
Right, of course. That'll be important to get right.
Remember we talked about that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Sorry. So the client needs to make an appointment for their pet. They'll talk to a staff member who will schedule the appointment. What kind of information do they need in order to do that?
So that really depends on the type of appointment. It could be an office visit or it could be a surgery. Why don't we talk about the office visits first? If it's just for a wellness exam, that's pretty standard. They just need to choose an available time slot with one of the doctors. Some of the visits can be scheduled with just a technician though, so if they need just their toenails trimmed, for example.
Or painted. Like Samson, he gets his toenails painted.
Does he really?
No, I'm joking. I just want to. Pink.
I'm sure he'd love that. Okay, so office visits might be an exam requiring the doctor or another kind of appointment that only requires a technician.
Right, we also have to worry about our rooms too. We only have 5 exam rooms available, and we try not to overbook. We don't like for our clients to have to wait too long in the reception area, especially if we have a lot of cats and big dogs out there at the same time. It makes them all really nervous.
What about other staff?
So our technicians will float between the exam rooms and other areas of the clinic as needed, except of course for those scheduled technician visits. We do have a schedule for the staff, but it's separate from how we schedule our appointments.
Okay, so what about the surgeries?
Well, if it's a surgery, those are only scheduled on certain days, and they require that the operating room be available, as well as some recovery space in the kennel area. It also depends on what kind of surgery or procedure we're going to be doing. Something simple like a dental cleaning takes less time and fewer people than a cesarean section for a bulldog.
Okay, so an appointment is either an office visit or a surgery. Office visits happen in the exam room. Surgeries require the operating room and recovery space. Is that right?
Right, and depending on the reason for the visit or the surgery, different staff might need to be involved.
So we'll probably want to have separate classes for appointments and surgeries.
Classes? No, we refer our clients to obedience and puppy preschool classes at other facilities. We don't actually schedule any of those in the clinic themselves.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a software term. In software, we have different classifications of concepts in the program, which are called classes. I'm just getting ahead of myself here, sorry.
Don't worry, we're not going to make you learn our software terms. Steve and I will try to have a little bit more self-control with that. We do want to make sure we're all speaking the same language when it comes to concepts in the application, though.
Okay, so I have another quick question. Do we have to worry about multiple staff members scheduling appointments at the same time?
No, there should only ever be one person doing the scheduling at a time. Although, I could see if we grew in the future that could change. But I don't think that'll happen in the next couple of years.
Okay, then we don't have to worry about the rare occurrence of two people creating conflict if they're trying to schedule an appointment for different patients in the same room or with the same doctor. That'll keep things a lot simpler. And we need to know before an appointment if certain resources are available, like rooms and doctors. And then if they are, and we want to schedule the appointment, then we need to be able to book the doctor, the room, and any other resources. Hey, is it okay if we refer to doctors as resources?
Sure, that makes sense. I think it makes sense to use the term resources to refer to the doctors, the rooms, and the technicians, since those are all things that can affect whether or not an appointment can be scheduled. But remember, sometimes it'll be just a vet tech in a room, and other times it might be the doctor in the room, but sometimes you might need the doctor, the technician, and a room.
Wow, this is a lot more complicated than we'd realized. But it's interesting. This is going to be cool to model in the application.
Some of the things we learned in that initial high-level discussion with the domain expert included the fact that patients and clients are not the same thing to a veterinarian.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious in hindsight, but in most other medical professions, it is the patients who make appointments and pay the bills. It's good we were able to get on the same page with the customer on that early on in the process.
I think it helped Dr. Smith put some of the processes she uses into explicit terms that we could program against also. A lot of times, just describing the process to someone who's unfamiliar with it can really help improve the understanding of it. It's like that idea that when you have to teach something to someone else, it makes you learn it a lot better. Listen to what Dr. Smith had to say at the end of our conversation about this.
Yeah, I never really thought about the details of how we do some of these things, since it's just something we do and we don't really think about it. Being more explicit about what the rules are that determine how we do our scheduling could help us avoid some of the occasional scheduling problems we've had. This is going to be great.
We also need to remember not to use too much programmer jargon, especially when there are programming terms that might have a different meaning in the customer's domain.
I agree. It's a little early for us to be worrying about how things might end up looking in the code anyway. At this stage, the main focus is on understanding the domain. We'll get to building the software soon enough, but first we want to make sure we know what problem it's going to be solving. One of the most important things we can do as we explore the problem with the domain expert is to try and make their implicit knowledge about the process they use now explicit. Once we're able to capture the process and its rules and exceptions with some detail, we can start to work on modeling a solution using this information.
Building software is hard. One of my favorite sayings is, as software developers, we fail in two ways. We build the thing wrong, or we build the wrong thing. By making sure we understand what the customer needs, and of course working closely with the customer throughout the development process, we can dramatically reduce the likelihood of the second kind of failure, which is much harder to fix typically.
Hey, Steve, I like the way you quote yourself here, but it really is a great quote.